folks, how's it going? Let me know if audio is coming through okay. I'm using the webcam mic again, the left mic's been acting up. Welcome to Carbide Office Hours episode 20. If you missed it, we published a blog post detailing all of the new features of our upcoming machines. So if you haven't given that a read, you still have time right now. I'm going to run through all of those changes and new features as well. And then we can jump into a Q&A session. I got some questions saved from you guys, and if you have any other questions, you can drop them in the chat, and I will try and get to them as I work my way through that list. Okay, how is everyone doing? It's been a while since our last episode, about a month. The last episode we missed because I was super busy working on Nomad stuff. Let me try bumping up the audio just a tiny bit. There is HVAC going in the background, which you might hear occasionally, but we're going through another mini heat wave in California here right now, so I kind of don't want to turn it off. So I guess let me throw up the Nomad, just because looking at my face is boring. Let's see, my camera feed working. So, what do you think, guys? Nomad 3. Actually, did my microphone input switch? Give me a second. All right. Does it sound better now? Or if it's fine, that's great. So, welcome to the Nomad 3. This is a pretty big change over the old Nomad 883 Pro, and I'll read you through everything that's going on with this machine, because it's, for me, having worked through this, having come from the 883 Pro, the quote-unquote classic machine, there's a lot of things in this that I'm really excited about. So let's run through the changes, and then we can sort of open this up. So this is not like a revolutionary change, but it's a really good evolutionary change for the Nomad. A lot of things were refreshed. The structure is still really solid as before. We've got machined aluminum. Every contacting face is machined high precision, so it's square. We upgraded the mechanical limit switches with inductive switches. We've upgraded the controller board, which will be the same one in the Shapeoko Pro. So that is a 4-layer PCB, a lot better thermals, a little better EMI performance, new lead nuts. So these are much beefier contact areas, so they should wear less and be able to hold a lot better. The spring in that anti-backlash nut system, if you want to nerd out about those things, has also been strengthened. So we should just have a lot better holding performance on like the 1 or 2 thou scale. So if you're trying to hold really tight tolerances, it should be even better. And we plan on doing a better job calibrating these machines. So expect the same accuracy, perhaps even better. And let's see. One of the things you'll notice about the Z-axis is that we've changed to linear bearings, just to shrink everything down, because the architecture up here has changed. We have a 150 watt motor mounted up here. We have a round belt pulley system connecting it to the spindle, and that just gives us smoother performance. If you're an old Nomad user and you turn on the spindle, you might remember there's like a little bit of a clicky character to that motor noise. That's mostly due to the GT2 belts as the teeth engage. So this should sound really smooth and give you a nice consistent RPM performance. The table here, we'll just switch actually to this camera. This table here, instead of being 1/4 inch, is now 3/8 of an inch, which means that any accessories you bolt down, this is going to be a little more rigid and hold its flatness even better, even though the 1/4 inch is actually really great. The real benefit personally from a support perspective is that you have a little more room for thread engagement. There have been numerous times where I make a custom fixture, I bolt it down, the screws go through the table and scratch up the cover here. So just, it's a nice upgrade. It does not affect the clearance you get under the spindle carriage. Let's see. AB nut compatibility with the Pro. The way the anti-backlash nuts connect to the carriages is different. They're no longer round, so they're not going to fit on the old carriages. And as you might tell, the biggest difference personally for me is the lighting. We've got two strips of LEDs, one up here, one down here. They run directly off our 24-volt system. There's no dimmer, so there shouldn't really be any flicker issues if you're filming. But for me, personally, as a content creator, that's the most exciting part. Just if you're working over this machine and you're trying to look at your part and the lighting in the room is not so good, as it often is not in some shops or garages or even down on the shop floor at Carbide, just this makes looking at your part, seeing what's going on, a lot easier. You've got side windows too. These are held on with 6 M4 screws. So if for some reason you want to remove these and maybe plumb in some vacuum hose, you do have that option now without drilling a hole in your enclosure. Personally, this was the thing that I was the biggest advocate for when I was designing the enclosure, because if you have a part on the table and you're trying to line up, sort of just eyeballing this to find an origin to start machining from, you can really easily take an end mill and find the X origin just by looking down the part and aligning left-right with the corner. But if you're trying to align an end mill with the part in the Y-axis, it's really hard to sort of look down the side of the machine and sort of gauge when the end mill crosses the front or back of the stock. So with the windows, you can do that a lot better. So it's really just, this is my favorite addition right here. Okay, so let me start going through questions just to make sure I didn't miss anything pertinent here. I'm going to jump over, I don't have a Shapeoko Pro up here because it's a little difficult to move upstairs, but I got a couple pictures we can show it through, and we can talk through those changes. Let me see if there's any good Nomad questions here. How is metal machining? So this machine is just as capable as the Nomad, if not more so. The advantage of the new spindle motor and the new gearing, the pulley ratio here, is that we get 24,000 RPM. And on a small desktop machine like this, chip load is sort of the defining parameter for cuts. If you're trying to machine something with an 1/8 inch end mill, that end mill can only take a certain size bite into the material every time it comes around per revolution. There comes a point where you can't take a larger bite, because then you just start getting chatter and other really nasty things happening in the machining. So you want to take lots of little bites per second, which means you want a faster spindle speed to actually be able to be more productive in metal. So that high RPM really helps, especially with 16th inch, 32nd inch engraving, because those really tiny cutters, you really want that spindle rotating as fast as possible to make the most use of it. So I foresee a lot of improvement for people doing precision work, and we have improved bearings in the spindle assembly itself, dual angular contacts. So what that means is the bearings will hold the spindle shaft a lot more concentrically, which means it doesn't vibrate as much. You can push harder without that cut. Sometimes if you push really hard on these machines, you hear sort of like a rattly, screechy sound. We've pushed that limit further up, so you can push harder and still get decent sounding cuts. Okay, let me keep going. Rigidity is just as good as before, if not better. This bar back here, that is also our heatsink for the enclosure, is like 1 inch thick and about 5 or 6 inches wide. There's a metric measurement, but between this, the solid aluminum uprights, the extrusion and solid bar frame, you could I wouldn't recommend it, but you could probably drop this machine on the floor right now and pick it up, and it would be pretty darn close to as square as it was before it started. Let's see. More enthusiasm, Winston. Where's the confetti? Confetti hopefully will not happen today because I can see down to the shop floor. And so if I keep my peripheral vision open, I'll have some early warning if someone decides to sneak up here. But I'm hoping that we remain free of any unexpected surprises. Let's see. Okay. We have some Emperor's New Groove fans here. That's fantastic. Cost is $2,800. And it's a small increase, but we've got a couple small things we might include to try and improve the value proposition. Also, one more thing to mention with this, because we're cutting out these windows, there's a piece of stock here that we will include so that we can give you sort of a starter project to play with. It's going to be a end mill and collet wrench organization tray, and I will have pictures of that probably shared on the Carbide 3D Instagram in about a week or so. So it should be a fun project, and it'll work well with the default end mills that come with the machine, which is the 1/8" 101 and 102, I believe. So 1/8" ball, 1/8" square. Okay, let's keep scrolling ahead. Can I see it with the door closed? Sure you can. This was a part of it that I had to iterate on it a couple times as I was designing it, just to make sure the between the door, the front edges, everything fit together really well. There's two bends here. There's a tiny bit of a distortion. This is acrylic, so it's a little more scratch resistant than polycarbonate. It should keep in the chips, it's not like a soundproof enclosure, but it sort of muffles it a little bit, which helps. And it goes far enough back that if you're standing looking down on the machine, if you're an average height person or even a little taller, you can still look down and see your part. That was one thing we didn't want to compromise on, because the old Nomad had sort of a diagonal window that went straight up across, and so for any person standing in front of the machine, you're really not compromising your sight lines because you can sort of look down and diagonally in. If we had a machine with a roof that came straight forward and a door that swung up from just the vertical face, tall people would be probably not really liking the machining experience. So between the LEDs, between the bent door, you should have really good visibility. Okay, let's keep going. Let's see. All right, let's talk Shapeoko now. Let me pull up some pictures and we can walk through that. All right, let's go. All right, so what is the best overall picture of the Shapeoko? There we go. All right, let's start with that, and we'll walk through the changes. All right, so first things first, Shapeoko Pro. First thing you notice is linear rails. When I first put together this machine, and I built it, I grabbed the router and I just gave it a little shake just to see if it would move, and there was nothing. It was rock solid, and it genuinely put a smile on my face. So this machine was designed to address all the gripes and grievances people had with the Shapeoko 3. This does not replace the Shapeoko 3. These two exist in tandem. So we wanted to take the Shapeoko, make it stronger, more rigid, and give people a way to step up if they want. So linear rails on every axis. We have basically a modified Z Plus with linear rails on that. HV15s on Z and X, and MGN 15 linear rails on the Y. I think there's a picture up here. So that shows you our motion system. We flipped the rail to the back of the Y-axis carriage plates, so you get more usable room over the table. Let's see. Oh, if you look down here, the y-axis rails are supported. There are aluminum extrusions that go all the way across the bed, and the rail ties into these with standoffs. So the y-axis rails are fully supported. Our extrusions were already extremely robust, kind of overbuilt, honestly. But this just guarantees that you have one less place where any sag could be introduced at all. That table that's built on top of this frame is, we call it the hybrid table, and it's, let me see if I got a good picture. Where's the zoom on this? So the hybrid table is a custom aluminum extrusion, and on that we also support MDF. So this goes all the way front to back on the machine, and with a bunch of these, that forms the work area for the Shapeoko Pro. The sides of these channels are designed so that you can use this with T-slots and T-nuts. The MDF, you can do whatever you want. You could drill into it, you could use adhesive work holding, you could install threaded inserts. This gives you basically all the flexibility you'll need to work hold any part. We've got an integrated bit setter on the front of the machine. This is a pre-production prototype, so when we actually ship, this module will be removable so that you can surface down the MDF completely, so you have a machine level work surface. But bit setter is one of the features that has been really popular on the Shapeoko, and it's such a time saver that we thought that for a pro machine, it's kind of non-negotiable to have something that important. Let's see, let's keep going through the list. And oh, new spindle mount. So this guy. So this is a completely new machined spindle mount for the 65mm routers or 65mm spindles. Sorry, just making sure no one's sneaking up on me. It bolts through the front, so instead of the old square aluminum block that you would bolt to the EasyTram plate, this is a single piece, bolts through the front, and the bolts that clamp to the router are independent of the bolts that go all the way through into the Z-axis plate. So you can loosen this, you can tram it without the router getting loose. And oh no, oh no. Woo! That is so much confetti. Oh, what have they done? Yay! Ooh. I'm a little traumatized right now, I'm not gonna lie. There's so much confetti. Okay. Well, yes, if you couldn't tell, we are all very excited about the new machines coming out. So, where was I? Router mount? Router mount. So yeah, this is a taller mount than the previous mount, so it'll support the router more solidly, more rigidly, and ensure that it's perfectly vertical. This will also be good for smaller spindles. We have considered putting an HDZ on this. We just need to figure out how to mount it, since the mounting system to the linear rails is a little different. So you can expect that down the road if you want to use a heavier, say 2.2 kilowatt, 80mm spindle. I did say they were sneaky. I thought I saw something out of my peripheral vision, and then I heard something at the door. They didn't show themselves until I was not looking, though. Leaf blower, great idea. Maybe compressed air, shop air. It'll be a good change. Okay, let me get back to the list of Shapeoko Pro changes to see. Oh, new faster assembly experience. So I can't show you this yet because I don't have a machine to put together. But to assemble the Shapeoko Pro is such an improvement over the old one. So let me go full screen on this. Desktop only. Explode that view. So I can walk you through the steps because it's that straightforward. We're going to instruct you to sort of open up your components in a specific order. The first step is to pull out the extrusions that go across on the x-axis and just lay them out front to back. On the double XL, there's 4 of these bars that go all the way across. I think XL and regular size that will come later this year are going to have either 2 or 3. So those go across. There are trays that run along the outside of the machine that are where the drag chains run. Cable management is something we're considering like from the beginning, so it's not just like tacking on drag chains and hoping there's enough room for the cables. Every aspect of wiring this machine has been considered. Anyway, step 2 of that frame is to lay out the hybrid table. You put the extrusions across, you tie them into the cross straps loosely. When you bolt everything together, again, just like the Nomad, every interfacing piece of the Shapeoko has been machined. So the ends of the rails are as perpendicular as the Haas that they're machined on. And so when you bolt these plates on and tie them into the frame, the machine sort of squares itself. There's a tiny amount of adjustment you can do by maybe pushing in the opposite corners of that machine. But for the most part, this machine is going to come together and be basically seamless in terms of when the gantry moves forward or backwards and the squareness of the machine. Once you tie in the hybrid table, you install the y-axis rails onto the standoffs. So they basically bolt down to the cross members. You install the end plates, and then you install the gantry. The whole gantry comes as a single assembly. So basically, you open a box. There's no Z assembly on it, but there's the whole x-axis rail and the stepper motors installed in one piece. So you literally just drop this onto the linear rail blocks that are already mounted on the y-axis rails, bolt those in, and then you bolt the entire z-axis to a little adapter plate that rides on the x-axis linear rails, and that's the bulk of the mechanical assembly. You can add in some drag chains. We do dual drag chains, so one for the spindle or router, and one for the stepper motors and inductive switches. And so this gives you like the flexibility if in the future, say you want to swap out the router for a VFD spindle, you have that option. Or if you want to do something water cooled, you have a whole drag chain dedicated to whatever you want to do. Let me jump back into the chat, see what I've missed. Let's see. How machining aluminum on the Pro compared to the Shapeoko 3? So, big thing, rigidity. When you're taking a cut, I'm sure if you've pushed it in aluminum, you can just keep bumping up the feed rate or the depth of cut until the point where you start to hear just a little thrum, almost like a helicopter in the distance or some vibration sneaking into the cut. Because you've got the linear rails, that threshold has been pushed up a lot. On top of that, the belts on the Shapeoko Pro, let me zoom in on these so you can at least get a sense of scale. So these belts are 66% wider than the original belts that we have. We went from 9 millimeters to 15 millimeters. So there, at this point, there's almost no belt stretch. You will break the stepper motor before this belt will deform appreciably. So at this point, we're limited mainly by the holding force of the stepper motors. So basically, forget about belt stretch. Your spindle will remain dead perpendicular because there is no deflection about the x-axis. That interface is so much stronger. You're limited by the stepper motor and the router basically, and you can push these stepper motors pretty hard. The router will definitely give out first, I would think, from the testing that I've done. So let me just go through that list, make sure there's nothing I missed. Yeah, linear bearings every axis, 15 millimeter belts. The hybrid table, fully supported y-axis. There's almost no structural, well, there is no structural sheet metal in this machine. Every component that supports the machining is either aluminum extrusion or machined aluminum plate. Integrated bit setter, the new router mount, Carbide Motion 3.0 electronics. So the redesigned controller board, 4-layer PCB. Gone are the days of the riser blocks. If you did the proximity switch upgrade on the old, I say old, but still current Shapeoko 3, you had to install a little riser block because we didn't have the right plugs for the inductive switches. Or if you wanted to use the bit setter and the touch probe, we only had one connector for that. Because this is a new controller, we had time to think through everything we need to add in, so all those connectors are in there. Everything plugs in like it was meant to be there, which is a nice touch. Work area with the Shapeoko is almost identical. The one thing that makes it more convenient is because the y-axis is swapped to the back of the carriage plate, you have more room over the work surface, so you can have more of your workpiece supported. Let me see if I don't think I have a good picture of that. Let's go there and take a look. Gotta brush the confetti off my keyboard. This is an okay shot to sort of show that off. The rail is on the back of the carriage plate, so when this gantry moves all the way to the front, you can basically touch the bit setter and go maybe a centimeter past that, but the rest of your work area is over the hybrid table. So we think people will find more use out of that. Where do you store the hoist and crane? You got to plan ahead if you want to elevate a Shapeoko Pro. But the really great thing about this is that that table is super solid. There's no sag whatsoever because it's resting directly on your workbench. So if you pick it up, if you set it down, the bed's going to go back to exactly the same flatness as it was before. Will the Nomad have additional probing options? That is something we are working on, because when we switched to the newer spindle, our minimum RPM increased. We went for a range that's, I think, 8,000 to 24,000. And the Wiggler center finders that you can install that spin, and when you touch the part, they pop off center. Those don't work above 1,800 RPM. So we're looking into bringing a touch probe for the Nomad so that you can probe whatever stock you have in the machine. So there is an additional connector on the side of the machine where you can plug in a touch probe and bring it around, set it up, and then use that to find the origin of your stock. So we think that'll be a pretty good way to go, and it honestly should be quicker than using that Wiggler. Okay. Is the Z height same as the standard or the HDZ? The Z height is going to be closer to the Z Plus. This is kind of a modified Z Plus on the Shapeoko. So I don't have a good picture. Yeah, so the height of this carriage is roughly the same. The nose to table, which is the distance between the router collet and the work surface when you jog down all the way, is about 3/4 of an inch. So basically we brought the table incrementally closer because we do notice that sometimes people, when they're trying to machine into the baseboard, say that their tools can't reach, so they can't install threaded inserts or something. So we wanted to make sure that you had as much usable travel as possible. And with this bed, you shouldn't really need to put additional MDF or anything on top of it. You can machine directly on top of this. You can put your work holding features on it. So overall, I think it's a win for everyone. You have to do less work to have more machinable work area. Any plans on going away from belts in the future, ball screws? At this point, for the Shapeoko, it would stop to be stop being a Shapeoko. We like belts for this architecture because they're actually incredibly simple. There's really no maintenance you have to do with it. Compared to like a rack and pinion system, you don't have to do any engineering at all to eliminate backlash on that. Because with that, you need like a gear and the pinion and pre-compression on that. What will be the lead time when these release on the 15th? We're hoping for within a week or two. So if you order it on the 15th, plus or minus a couple days, hopefully it'll be in the mail before the end of October. How are we keeping the rails clean? Let's see. So most linear bearings have wipers on the ends of them. Let me switch to a different picture, or let me just zoom in on this. All of these holes should be capped when we ship, but on these rails, basically there's a wiper on the bearing block. Any dust will be pushed off the ends of the linear rails and just fall off. In terms of keeping the tops of the rails clean, we will again be including sweepy with these machines. So other than maybe aluminum chips that just get thrown clear of any sort of spindle dust collection you have, it should basically keep itself clean. This is really distracting, sorry. And because there's like the biggest issue with cleanliness on the old Shapeoko was the V-wheels, because if those get clogged up with dust, you could lose a step. So this basically, there shouldn't be any points of failures with regard to machine hygiene on these. All right, let me keep going through questions. So, yeah, the support team is on point answering all of the major questions about pricing, availability. If you have any questions specifically about the usage or specs of these machines, let me know. So because just about every part of this machine is different than the standard Shapeoko 3, there is no direct upgrade path. The carriage plates are different, the extruded rails are different, the bed is different, none of the sheet metal frame will work, the bit setter is different, the Z Plus has a different hole pattern to mount to the linear rails. So unfortunately, you basically have to replace your entire machine. So there is no upgrade path from the 3 to the Pro. A lot of you have asked about whether or not the hybrid table can be brought over. That is something we're looking into. Can't promise anything yet, but this could be maybe an alternative to our T-track table in the future. The cutting size should be pretty near identical. I haven't taken a tape measure to this, but as far as I understand, these are meant to be functionally identical to the standard size, the XL, and the double XL. Button on the Y rib, yes it is. So in addition to the integrated bit setter, there's also a power button. We still ship with the adapter block that has a switch in line with it, but there's also a second power switch, basically in series with that. So if you could sort of use this as an e-stop. It will shut off the motors, halt the machine. If you're using the bit runner, that should also shut it off. If you're using just a router, though, you'll have to shut off the router separate. But there is a way to turn off the machine right at the front of the machine that's really easy to access. Okay. So I completely forgot to go through the other questions that people have asked before. Give me a second. Someone asked if 80mm spindles are possible on this. Not yet. When we get the HTZ worked out, that will have an available 80mm mount that they can use. In terms of purchasing this internationally, right now at launch, we're still ramping up in terms of our manufacturing, in terms of the availability. So on October 15th, we'll be the only ones carrying it. And then as we catch up with the initial surge, as we build up inventory, we'll start opening it up to distributors. So if you can purchase it from us and ship it. If that shows up as an option in checkout, you can buy it from us. Otherwise, you will probably have to wait until our distributors get a hold of the machine. Someone asked, can they purchase a Nomad 3 to make parts for the Shapeoko Pro to upgrade their own machine? Sort of. If you can fit all the components in an 8x8 work area, yes, you actually probably could, but it may be more effort than it's worth. But if you want to purchase a Nomad 3 for that purpose, I encourage you to do so. Have I named the machines yet? I have not. This particular machine has changed forms so much. I have probably half a dozen of these side panels that I just iterated through. And just there have been a lot of changes ongoing with this, so I never really felt comfortable giving it a name just yet. But now that we've taken some of the pretty shots that we need to, and I can actually start getting it dirty and making some real chips, maybe I'll give this a name. The Shapeoko Pro, verdict's still out yet because it is still a non-representative prototype. The metal components are all like version 1.0, and we've got a couple more changes like that removable bit setter. So in that current form, this Shapeoko may yet change. So where does the Nomad 3 shine versus the old Nomad? My answer, spindle RPM. Again, you can use small tools where normally those small tools, the engravers, they have to take really small bites out of the material per revolution of the cutter. Every time a cutting flute comes around, it can only bite so deep into stop. So usually, spinning at 10,000 RPM, you can only feed so fast. Increasing, like if you double the RPM, you should be able to double your feed rate, assuming the tool can handle it and you're not going to break the tool. Really fine detail work with small tools, that is where you'll see the biggest improvement. But if you're trying to be productive, if you're trying to remove a lot of material, this machine should also be faster than the old one in all cases, basically. Let's see. I guess I can talk about this. So the spindle is a square block. We switched to this architecture because it's a lot easier to bolt directly to our carriage plate. And let me see if we switch to that camera shot. Because this is no longer a turned part, we can do whatever we want with this block. We actually make just about everything in-house except for the bent sheet metal parts. But on this spindle block, there's actually 2 M4 holes in the side, which means that for all of you who've been clamoring for a way to attach maybe an air blast or a vacuum attachment, you have a way to do that. In fact, just because you guys are on the live stream and awesome, I will share sort of a little project that I've been working on. It's a slotted 3D printed part that you can bolt into these holes. And I will be open sourcing all of this. But basically, this lets you just tuck a vacuum hose right in front of the cutting tool. So if you're cutting like walnut or MDF, where the airborne particles you really don't want to escape, that should help you contain it. And if you maybe remove a window, then you can plumb in that hose, keep the door closed, and keep machining. So little things like that. Like there's just so much more growth potential with this machine now. So I'm going to have a lot of fun with it, and I hope you guys too. Someone asked about the Nomad design, the inspiration, and it really comes down to legacy. The Nomad has previously been like a trapezoidal, I can't type. Keyboard is covered in confetti. The Nomad, let's see. Like the old Nomad shape is this big chamfer on the front, but overall pretty square. Basically the length, the width, and the height are pretty much near identical, like give or take like 20 millimeters or so. So when I was designing the enclosure, I was thinking, how do I translate this shape into a new machine that addresses some of the annoyances I had before, such as the sight lines, wanting to be able to see across the x-axis with windows. And so I kept that chamfer on the front because that's kind of the identifying mark of the Nomad. So there's that visible DNA. We're keeping the bamboo plywood as an option because we think it just looks awesome, especially with the LEDs. So for me personally, like working on this machine, it's how do we make this still feel like a Nomad while improving all the small usability and ergonomic issues that I've personally experienced and really wanted to fix. So yeah, really just making sure there's that common DNA, but improving everything we can touch, everything we can improve. Yeah. When are the standard and XL Shapeoko Pros coming? Later this year. Once we get the double XL production line just streamlined and good, we will expand the availability of the other size machines. And yeah, those will come soon enough. Well, not soon enough for me because personally in my garage, I can't fit the double XL. So I'm really itching for an XL or maybe even a standard size machine. All right, let's go back to the chat, see if there's anything new. Let's see. About how loud is the Nomad? Wondering if I could get away running it in my bedroom without driving my roommates insane. So the cutting noise of a CNC is a lot of the times based on the kind of cut you're taking. You can take any cut, even a traditionally noisy cut, reduce the depth of cut, reduce that force that's going into the part, into the spindle, and make it quieter. There just gets to a point where you're really kind of wasting your own time because it's going to take so long. For a productive feed rate, this isn't really going to be any quieter than the old Nomad, because even going from 10,000 to 18,000 RPM isn't going to make your cut significantly quieter. The threshold before the machine starts chattering, that's going to improve. So you can maybe push a little harder without that shrieking that you sometimes get if you really push it. But it's not going to be a revolutionary change. This isn't like a cast iron machine and it's going to slice through aluminum dead silent. It's a CNC milling machine. It's going to make some noise. Let's see, let's keep going. Yeah, honestly, you could almost make an enclosure for the Nomad just like you would make an enclosure for a Shapeoko. Just put this box in another box and then ship that box to yourself and not smash it with a hammer. Let's see. It does seem like a prison cell. If you put some bars on these windows, this studio would be just a little more. I really want you guys to see how much confetti is in here. Please hold. There's a lot. It's all over my keyboard. It was all over the machines. I have made the mistake of sweeping some back here, and now it's on the Shapeoko. The situation is extremely dire right now. So yeah, someone asked if you can do steel on the Nomad. That's kind of an edge case. So because we moved up the RPM range, steel, there's a speed limit in steel that your tool really shouldn't exceed, otherwise you start generating heat and your tool life goes way down. And that's like about 300-ish surface feet per minute. You can work that out to metric, give or take 100. And so with the 8,000 RPM spindle minimum that we have, if you use maybe about 2 to 2.5 millimeter tooling or smaller, you should be able to do steel at the lower range of the machine. But you pretty much have to run at a lower RPM, like as low as you can go, unless you're using maybe a 16th inch end mill or doing some really tiny engraving in steel. Then you can start ramping up the RPMs. But this machine is more tailored to aluminum and the other traditional wood, plastic, other softer materials, non-ferrous materials. Um, let's see. I wouldn't say the old Nomad is better for steel. Just because you can go slower with the RPM range doesn't mean it's actually better. Because it's a lower horsepower motor too. So even on the low end, our torque band on this machine should be better than the old machine. You have less flexibility with that RPM. You have to start at the minimum if you're going to use 3/32 inch or 1/8 inch tooling. Personally, I would not want to use tooling larger than 2 millimeters on this Nomad or the old Nomad if I'm cutting steel. But you can do a lot of detail work with a 16th inch end mill. With steel though, it's tricky because you hit that threshold where you hit chatter really suddenly, so you got to be really good with your speeds and feeds. And yeah, so it's not for the faint of heart. You can do it. I'm sure some crazy person is gonna try and like maybe swap the gear ratios on the spindle motor to make it better in steel, but that's not something we intend for the machine to do. Okay, so I think that covers the questions that I have received previously. If you guys have any last minute questions, specifically Nomad 3 or Pro or just CNC in general, I've got Carbide Create here if anyone wants to ask about that. Let me know. This has been a fantastic time again with you all. We love that you guys come out and join us for these events, and that we have a community of people who are as passionate about this as I am. So any last minute questions, let us know. I'll be monitoring the chat, and even when I sign off, we'll keep the conversation open for a couple more minutes before YouTube kicks us out. So if you didn't catch us during the live stream, let us know. And also, we do have a thread in the Carbide 3D community forums. So if you want to keep the conversation going, got a couple more questions, you can ask us there. When is the Nomad 3 available? Nomad 3 will be launching on October 15th. There are a couple small things that I personally need to do, like the starter project, but we announced this machine back in like March or so, and we were thinking maybe mid-summer it'd be ready. But with COVID and everything happening, and the growing list of changes we wanted to make, this process took a little longer than we expected. It's kind of standard in engineering, but yesterday or Wednesday, when we dropped the announcement that this was happening, that's when we finally felt with a high degree of confidence that we could deliver on time. We didn't want to release a machine, announce it, and then be like, oh, but it's going to be delayed a couple more weeks. And so October 15th, plus or minus a day or two, that should be when we launch. Okay. What's your decision process with regarding choosing what wood to make with projects? Personally, for me, it depends on what I'm making and if there is a color palette that goes with it. I'm trying to think to recent projects. My laptop monitor right now is on a walnut and aluminum monitor stand. Let me see if I can show you guys. I don't know if the cord's long enough. So I have, I wanted to use a hybrid of materials for this project, and with aluminum being an integral part of this, because I wanted that strength, I decided that a darker color wood would be ideal. So that's why I settled on walnut. Walnut's really nice because it machines super easily and cleanly. I don't like using a lot of exotics just because they're more expensive. And also sometimes they're harder. So unless you need a very specific mechanical property, I often let aesthetics decide the species of wood that I'm using. Maple or cherry is my preferred wood for a lighter colored project. Oak I'll use it occasionally, but it's a lot more fibrous and it's a lot messier. You get a lot of tear out unless you use a down cutting end mill. Let's see, what other upgrades available in the future? That is top secret classified. I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. Does the Pro come with a bit runner built in? It does not. That would be something separate, but it does have the connector for it. So if I zoom in, other way, there's not a good picture of it, but the electronics enclosure is built in on the side of the machine. And there is a bit runner connector in there. So if you do choose to go with it, it's a plug and play accessory. Let's see. Is 2800 for base model, or does it include everything necessary? So basically everything you see here. I'm not sure about the router. I think that's included. I gotta double check. But the bit setter is included. So basically you can run with it as soon as you get it. You might want to consider something for work holding. You can use double-sided tape or something, but any clamps, that would be something extra. But as far as an operational, functional machine with all the tools necessary to use it, that should all be there. I don't have a direct performance comparison between the new Nomad and the old Nomad. But again, the biggest difference is going to be in the RPM. So I've done a couple tests. They're not like apples to apples tests because the toolpath is a little different. But I've taken the speeds and feeds I have programmed in Carbide Create, and I've just doubled the RPM, doubled the feed rate, and in plastics, woods, that has been totally okay. In aluminum, there's sort of a curve where you got to balance the extra stress on the machine versus the extra stress on the tool, but you can also still go faster. I don't know if it's a 100% improvement if it scales 1-to-1, but in every softer material that I've tested, I've pushed 200% and more. So it should be, if you do a variety of materials, it'll be really useful. What do you think the fundamental limits of resolution are for wood, if there are any, or if it's just a question of small cuts, small bits? So that was actually something I was playing around with a couple weeks ago. I was making these panels with chamfered edges with a lot of small cutouts. Your limitation with how small or fine a detail you can cut in wood mainly comes down to how well the fibers of that wood hold together. If you're cutting red oak, that really nasty stringy stuff that you can get at the home center, you'll get to a point where those features, your end mill will just rip the fibers of the wood apart. Or like even if you have a tall thin wall, it'll sort of just knock it over or chip out or tear out. That's really your limitation. In certain directions, you'll be able to get finer details than others, but this is also why V-carving is great, because you have features that come to a sharp point, but immediately under that point, there's more and more material to support it. So it's actually much stronger than if you were to try and do an engraving or an inlay with straight walled pockets. Let's see. For purchasing a machine in Australia, I would recommend reaching out to our sales team. For Nomad, if using vacuum, will you have to leave the lid open? So with the Nomad, there's this little guy here. It's a inductive switch. There's going to be I've removed it from my machine. There's going to be a little magnetic target here. So that'll be our interlock switch. It's a built-in safety feature so that if you're cutting and you open the lid, the machine will pause. I can't officially recommend you override it, but you can remove the side panels to route in a vacuum hose if you need to. Okay. How fast can the spindle go, or are there different types? On the Nomad, it tops out at 24,000 RPM. Will the spindle Z reach the spoil board? I believe on both the Shapeoko and the Nomad, it stops about a ½ inch from there. You're going to have a collet, a tool. If you need the face of that collet not to touch this, you're doing something really funky. The better solution, if you can't reach with a really stubby tool what you want to reach, is to just elevate your part. Put a sheet of MDF. There will be a threaded table you can buy for this as well, where you can just elevate your part. So the travel should be the same as the old Nomad, and this should get pretty close. Actually, I might just try it for you guys. Let's see how far this goes. That is as far as it goes. So that is, I want to say about 20 millimeters. With the collet nut, it will actually be about another couple millimeters down, so 3/4 of an inch or less between spindle to table. But you'll probably have an MDF table on this, so it should be not a non-issue. Okay, any other last minute questions? A fold-out bar in the streaming room would be fantastic. Fortunately, I am just drinking water right now, but maybe we can change that later. All right, everyone, we're at about an hour, so I'm going to wrap it up here. I'll stick around in the chat for a couple more minutes if you have any other questions, but thank you all for joining us. I'm super excited for these machines to make it out into the wild. We've been working on these like just throughout the whole pandemic phase, and I've been so anxious to share all of this. So thanks for joining us. Have a great day, have a great weekend, and we'll see you again on the next episode. Take care, guys.